going to do a campaign drawing?
Yeah, we'll give you a cue.
We'll be awkward.
Excellent connection. Look at that.
You said like around.
She'll love that everybody can hear us,
Yeah.
but they can't see us right now. Yeah, nerds. All right.
Wicked nerds.
Oh. Boy, I hope this is working. Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just sitting here for an hour and a half talking to
Look,
ourselves.
everybody get a good pose.
Yep.
Jack,
Nice.
go. Great.
Okay. Fantastic. Hello and welcome to Claritas' 3rd annual. Just kidding, I've gotten the no signal.
And
We're
cut.
trying.
I take it from the top. This time it's good.
God, these divas, bro.
All
These
right.
actors.
Welcome to the Claritas 3rd annual AMA. My name is Keller,
My name is Keenan.
My name's Chase.
My name is Chelsea.
My name is Chris.
and we are here for you to ask us anything. So we are going to go ahead and start answering some questions here. Our first question is, tomes seem to be an abundant resource. In world, where do tomes come from? How are they made? So nowadays, there's not a whole lot of tomes being produced, as they are relatively tricky to produce. I'll answer this a little bit, and I'll see if anybody else wants to popcorn in a little bit. But most of them seem to be from rather ancient writing, with some people seeing Sinjoran influence, some people seeing some High Elf influence, some different influences from most of the usual suspects that you might imagine to be associated with magic. But most of them are old. Only the newest ones being produced are the kinds that you would expect to be like a tier 1 tome that deal with more simple effects. Anybody else want to hop in on it?
I will hop in on the Soothsayer tomes, as a few people might have interacted with Soothsayer tomes. Those are something that are pretty much specified to specifically the Soothsayers faction of Wilshire. So it is not a thing that is commonly used or available in other circumstances. It is pretty much primarily being produced by that faction master, and kind of fundamentally operates a little bit differently than most other typical magic tomes do. But for those specifically, they're kind of their own little offshoot piece.
So yeah, that's a unique resource of Wilshire's.
Yep.
Next up, we have a question from Zach. Can players learn to make their own tomes? A fascinating question. Given the previous answer of how difficult they are to produce, would a player be able to? Theoretically. It would probably take a lot of downtimes and also some learning in-game from specific events and stuff. But yes, you probably could. It might only be to the effect of a tier 1 tome, so would it be worth your effort? I don't know.
That
Probably
might be your
not.
character's whole thing for
Yes.
like a year or two, but you could.
Yes. Something else that we didn't mention right at the beginning is we are going to be showing some things that we've been working on for a little bit. So some of you are aware that we've been working on a update to the website for quite some time now. Things are starting to get into motion. We don't have any kind of release date for you yet, but we do have some of the assets and things that are really exciting to look at, made by our very own Reese. So she is going to show some of those pictures of some of those kin. So we're going to go ahead and show that first one for you now.
Which
is, I'm not sure which one,
Yeah.
but I'm sure
We
it's
don't
great.
remember.
It's one of them.
I think it's a female Bondi.
I hope so. No, that's not the first
I'm
one.
wrong.
That's
It's a
Got it.
Well, now you know another one that's
Yeah.
coming up, so you get excited for that.
It's called a
Spoilers. I'm sorry.
We all hope you love the fantastic art that is being produced by Reese as much as we do, because we've all just been like melting with excitement by just how fantastic
literally
it is
the
to...
highlight of our life has been looking at that. It's insane.
Absolutely. It's been very, very fun.
Very good. So,
Our next question comes from Julie. Is there an NPC you put work into that the players didn't end up interacting with much? My last event,
It'd be sad.
everybody that went to the brink, there was multiple threads that didn't get pulled on because people were feeling conservative about their exploration while they were there, which is totally understandable. So there was some stuff that wasn't seen there, so that's one that comes to the front of my mind since I was recent, so recency bias there. Anybody else got any?
Give any specifics?
No.
No. Why not?
They missed it. It was...
wow.
Yeah, no, it
No.
was some people that may or may not have been involved with the Skybreak. You could have gotten some more insights to both sides there and what kind of transpired to give some more context to help with some decision making. So yeah,
Let's see.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
it is.
It is an
I
excellent
know there are answers that I can't think
Right.
of.
I mean,
We might be here for a while.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were a couple during the Blood and Sand event, because there was kind of like a couple of different avenues that could have gone to. So there were a couple of different crews that people could have interacted with. So I think both ended up interacting pretty heavily with the Emerald Crown and with the first thing that came to mind was Starbucks. Just the
The
Jolly
Star
Roger.
Buccaneer.
Oh, the
Blind Mermaid.
Blind Mermaid, thank you.
Yes.
I'm the one that made these. I should probably remember that.
Biscuits. Yeah.
Skits. Yeah, those ones. You guys say both got to interact with Kip a little bit as well. He has a whole crew that would have been fun to interact with, and still could. So I won't give too many specifics about that. But yeah, a lot of pirate crews that I hope to sprinkle in at some point or another.
Reminds me on at the Brink, the junior version, they did that boat. The juniors missed it 3 times,
Yeah,
and what it
Not
was.
missed it.
They did, they didn't miss it. They were told. They just didn't go on it, which is, again, they were conservative about their resources. But I feel like I can say what it was.
Yeah.
They would have gone to an abandoned Draconian warship, and inside they would have found a frozen pirate crew because of how they interact with how they do their thing, and they would have found a bunch of cool lore stuff and why they were there. And the seniors found it, but the juniors just didn't, and we were all very like, oh,
Yes.
how
All
unfortunate.
those.
The seniors are just a
Yeah.
little bit more adventurous with
I've
it.
got one. I can't go terribly in depth
Exploration.
about it because technically it could still be explored a little bit, but I don't expect it will be. After the main event quest, where a bunch of you, this is actually primarily only for seniors because that was kind of different between seniors and juniors. But although I will say that both things are notable in their own way, on their own direction. But the one that was the game main event thing, there on both sides is a mechanism that goes a little bit further that could be pursued. And in both cases they weren't, which is totally fine because it's not necessarily something that has to be pursued. Because that particular part of the story is fairly closed out, but it wasn't on either one, and I was kind of interested to see how you would interact with some of that future stuff there. But that did not get interacted with, which again is not like a huge big bummer thing, but I did have some other NPC interaction that would go down into if you had chosen to go that direction. But yes.
That was such a vague response.
Yeah, that was extremely vague. I'm sorry, it's not
I
clear
have this
there.
thing. You probably don't.
Yeah.
Part of that comes from the character being somewhat different between the two events as well.
Very
So
Yes,
it's
yeah,
hard to speak
so
too much to
their
either.
senior versus junior was significantly
That was the
different.
best response to that.
So
It was.
yeah,
I do wish that the seniors did interrogate 4 at the end of my event. That would have been really fun. Juniors did though, so we're competing with each other now.
Yeah.
Should keep a tally.
Who do you like? That'd be a good question. Who do you like more, the juniors or seniors?
No.
don't answer that. Don't answer that.
Oh, wait, shoot.
It varies too wildly.
All right.
Our next question is, what is the boundary of trial by goblin? For instance, if Pod wanted to assassinate the Baron using trial by goblin, how would that work? Would it make a difference if Pod just wanted to kiss the Baron? These are excellent questions,
so good.
and I'll give that to our resident goblin expert.
Christmas.
The first session is you should try. No, I'm kidding. One distinction of trial by goblin is it's not a combat thing. So if it's about assassinating or killing, don't count on it too much because you probably will just die. But if it's not about that, it is a massive question mark. It is meant to be super loose, as in you won't die or you'll be fine. Fine can mean a lot of things, so that is entirely dependent on the situation. If somebody were to try to kiss the Baron, I mean, you never know with him, honestly. You guys don't know him very well, so that could go a lot of directions, really.
Yeah.
All I can guarantee with that is that it wouldn't end in physical pain the first time.
Most likely.
And that should be taken as vaguely as it's
Yes,
described.
You won't die.
It is honestly really fun to think of how to get goblins out of situations without killing them when they try things.
Absolutely. Great
So I
goblin
guess
question.
to specify that a little further for the first half of that question, it's any non-combat situation where death is potentially an option. It removes death from being the option on the first try.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the best connection. It's the best one.
It's also a trial by error, not trial
Yeah.
by goblin.
Well, no, it's
Yeah.
not.
But at this point,
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Trial by goblin.
All right. We're gonna show another kin here. Oh, no, we're
No,
not.
no, we're
Just
not
kidding.
going to. We were lied to.
also for the record,
Yes.
Julie and Skylar as our RMs are here helping
Yes.
us.
So
Yes.
give
Yes,
them
give
some
them-
love in the
thank you,
chat.
Julie and
They
Skylar.
Thank you for the
are.
back.
Give them love and praise.
Yes, they're
Okay.
holding this together
They are.
for us.
with
So we'll do one more question.
wish.
Yes.
Next question: what is the most incorrect theory you have seen players put forth? From Brady.
So this is a little bit tricky because we need to. There's several theories that may or may not be correct present that people still are operating on,
Yes.
and so we need to think of one that would be like related to a specific event that has passed.
Let's see. One of my favorite was seeing Blood and Sand as a title and being like, "It's the wastes."
Yes. That was a good one.
Can't really blame you for that. That
Yeah.
does make perfect sense.
Yeah.
That counts as a theory.
I
but-
will.
Yes.
I will say, people who have given me names of who they think are heroes. I love hearing
Those are
those
fun.
are so fun.
Those are
I,
fun.
and I'll make the statement there that I'm not going to call out exactly what, obviously, but I will say that there has been some correctness and some incorrectness and some extreme incorrectness mixed in there. But I will say there has been like a notable amount of some correctness in there. So that's like not horribly wrong, but there are a couple names that get thrown out that I find quite humorous that are very wrong.
I'll
in that
confirm
list.
you've gotten at least 2 correct.
It's true. It's true.
I'm trying to think of any
Wild.
theories that we could.
Like
We could.
because I've heard some wild stuff. Like who the
There was some recent examples where we chatted a bit in the GM Discord where we were like, holy moly, they got some places fast.
oh yes.
Sometimes you guys connect the dots where before we've like really laid the groundwork, and other times we'll have given you a map with written coordinates and step-by-step directions, and you still aren't there. And so it's just wild from our perspective
It
how
is.
you can
It's
be
great.
so pinpoint before we've even like really. We're like, yeah, we'll get to that like in another 2-3 events, maybe next year, and then you're already there. And then sometimes we'll try to lead you there, and you just can't quite without a little extra prompting make it.
It's like that moment of I'm like, did I accidentally share a document with somebody
Yeah.
that I wasn't supposed to?
It's like,
Okay.
Oh.
Sorry for the slight. Maybe I want to ask them something, but I can't say it out loud.
breaking
I
immersion.
wanna, yeah,
Oh.
I'm breaking the immersion.
Oh, he's breaking
I
the.
just want to see because I think
We're
it's
no,
Tell
we're no
the
longer in a
t-shirt.
tavern.
Is this to us, Chris?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Okay,
All
so
right.
all the
I'm gonna
GMs
Because
get
I
their
want
phones
to,
out.
because I
Oh,
think this
wow,
would be.
okay.
I'm just gonna
I
write
don't
that.
have my phone with
okay.
me. It's,
Well, we have an
Chase
event
gets
today.
professional
Yes,
points.
Thank you.
Doctor.
My pleasure, Doctor.
I'm not a doctor.
Oh,
In
not
the
yet.
meantime,
Almost.
if we would like to take
Yeah.
a look,
Okay.
we are going to look at one of our next kin, and it is the Bondi. So
Yeah.
get excited to see Reese's excellent work on the Bondi art.
That's fine. I
Sure.
think that's fine, right?
Those jokes going around.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Everybody got a glimpse of that, right? Like. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
The Bondi!
The cool guy.
Real quick about this one, I enjoy this way too much because the Bondi one I had like a very specific vibe for, and I had like verbal descriptions, and then as I was talking to Reese about what they look like, she's like, "This is kind of unclear," and I'm like, "You're super right. I don't actually have a good image of what they should look like." So she gave me a bunch of different like options for shapes of the patterns that are on them and the like jagged parts that come off of them. And kind of got to go through and like pick and choose and make those work, which is super fun. So that was a cool one to see kind of come to life in a process.
That was the
Very cool.
opposite of us with Sojourn. When she showed us Sojourn, we were all like, "Oh, that's what that looked like." No idea.
Five us to no
They've been here
idea.
for like 10 years. We're all like, I actually could not.
That's a
say
Sinjoran?
Where's the whistle stuff?
We'll say, okay, so just real
Yes.
quick about the previous one I was asking. The jokes that were going around just before the brink about all the like flat Earth or T-Rex shaped Earth theory, and then the brink ended up to be somewhat about geographical shape was very funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that was a huge coincidence.
That was
So we're like,
Yeah.
it was a
It was delightful.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Very
steal our
delightful.
thunder. That was a funny one.
Yeah, that was wild.
The scraps.
All right.
Do that.
What is the meaning behind the name Claritas, and what inspired that to be the LARP's name?
Very good question.
Old person?
Back when he started. Yeah. Back in my day, when we were just dreaming up this thing called Claritas, we reached out to our good friend and resident Latin speaker, Chase Harvey. and Chase Harvey gave us some excellent words to choose from. And I think at the time we ended up picking 2 and mashing them together. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what the second word was?
Shoof.
Shrew.
Shroof. Yeah. I don't actually remember anymore.
I don't
I
either.
remember some of the vague like parts of it.
Uh-huh.
We just ended up. I remember we ended up deciding on a combination that we kind of liked the sound of. That was loosely related to some of the concepts at the time. I don't. It has been many moons since I have last studied Latin, and so I do not recall many of the Latin words that I used to know. And so I can't remember which ones are the ones that we had like actually put together, but I remember we had talked about a few of them. And we did mash like 2 of them together and then switch a couple letters around so that it sounded the way that we wanted it to sound. And for the most part, the name is fairly arbitrary. We were more or less looking for a name, and so took some concepts and got some Latin stuff, and then just went, well, looks nice.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that we had done that name change, I suppose we can talk about what inspired the reason to change the name in the first place, was do you remember the original name?
Adventure Quest?
Yes. So our original name for our LARP was Adventure Quest, and I think there was some point at which we had found out that is actually the name of another thing.
Yes. You can Google it. It's a little online game. You can play it right now if you want. It's very basic and very old, but it's already very much taken. So
Yes. So we had made the change, and I was approached lovingly by the GMs at the time, because I don't think I was a GM at that point.
Nope.
I think I was.
Your brother was.
My brother was a GM, but I was not a GM at that time, and so they approached me and said, "You know this other Latin language, and it's not spoken anymore, and archaic feeling." So we just put something together.
Yes.
So all in all, it needed a name change, and the name doesn't really mean anything. We kind of just took some inspiration from things like heroes and something about ages and stuff like that, and then kind of mashed it together, and we're like, hey, we like that word.
And you can tell them what it means in Latin.
I can't anymore.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it meant clarity.
Was it clarity?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yes.
I was like, I do
is-
not remember.
Yeah, so I believe Claritas, and I mean, you could Google this very fast and have your answer before we could probably get to you, but it should mean clarity, and that does have an in-game meaning. Some of you may recognize the word either Claritas or clarity being referenced to a specific age, and that was an important part of the story that we were telling, and this was kind of the age that was going to embody where the players were going to kind of pick up or be most relevant to what they are interacting with.
You remember that original piece better than I do. This is good. This is good stuff.
That's why we're all here is to help each other.
All right, so we've got
It's a good question.
a great question for the newer GMs. Keenan, do you want to read it?
Sure, yeah. So a question for the newer GMs, Chelsea and Keenan. What's something that surprised you about being a GM after you started the role? This comes from Jackie. Sounds familiar.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. So something that surprised me about after being a GM was how different the game is. And I know that sounds so broad, but like playing it for how many years I played it, and now being a GM.
Yeah.
Well, first off, the amount of like lore and stories you guys actually had, I was like, "Boy, this is actually cool."
Yeah.
Like playing it, you only see like a specific. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I know this thing about this thing, this thing about this thing, and then having that meeting of being a GM, and you're like, "Here's everything." I'm like, "Oh, you guys, you have 10 years of stories here.
Just
That's crazy."
seeing all the gears just turning together, and
Yeah.
you're like,
But it is also like a bittersweet thing, because now I can never go back and just play the
Yeah.
game, because I will see things like I know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both wonder and that. So whatever that was,
perfect segue.
Chelsea.
Very much the same thing.
That is fine. I don't know what it was. It's
We're
probably not
good.
important.
We're good.
It's alright.
Very much the same thing. Also, the amount of time that we spend on mechanics is boggling, because it really shows me to appreciate the game even more for all the years that you guys have been doing this, and just always trying to make it a more perfect and more understandable game. Also, very much with the story and lore, it's like, oh gosh, we haven't even scraped the surface. Okay, cool. But yeah, it also becoming a GM has made me fall in love with the world even more and appreciate it from another standpoint. So yeah.
Very good.
Good question.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie.
All right, our next question is, which fantasy setting, time period, or media would you pick to do a Claritas crossover episode with?
Lord of the Rings.
Okay, I'll start. We can go down the line.
Yeah.
I have an easy one because I already got to kind of do it, which is Western.
Hey, you
Yeah, the Sawtooth Sam quest was way too much fun to do because there were so many jokes that I had wanted to make about underwater Western, and it was just fun. I think the NPCs might have enjoyed that one more than the players did, but
Certainly possible.
that was a fun one. The little finger guns with pyromancy, all that was just a good time.
Excellent.
I don't know. There's so many options. And especially, I don't, it's really hard. I don't know why, but my mind keeps going to Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. I think that would be really fun to do.
Yeah, if we could pull off those mechanics.
Yes. Very different magic
This
systems.
is kind of a hard question because any of the ones we want to, we just kind of do.
To be fair, yeah.
I think I would really love this is more within the crossover episode quality of things, but I would really enjoy doing a in a video game environment thing where you have a modern environment, somebody goes to interact with the video game and the video game is Claritas kind of thing as a crossover episode.
Yeah.
I would really enjoy that.
That'd be really fun.
But don't worry, it's not all a dream. No, I would enjoy a crossover episode in that way.
Yes.
I would love Claritas during the Prohibition era. Guys, think about it. It's that low light jazz in the background, doing some gambling, maybe I don't know, just doing like a heist of some sort.
The Charleston dance.
Man.
The toadies in the corner playing jazz.
Yes. Make it work. I'm gonna have to piggyback a little bit off of what Chris said, which was if we want to do it, we kind of do it. So you'll kind of notice last event, I had a kind of stand apart crossover episode that I was I have a very specific vision. I'm gonna fit it into Claritas, in a way that was Claritas first, and then the idea was underpinning Claritas, not the other way around. So I want to make sure that Claritas at the end of the day is not getting kind of bowled over by our ideas, but and you've seen that also with the game event. Some of you are very familiar with the source material of what inspired that event, and so a lot of the times we can either through a main event or through a long-standing quest series or thing like that have that variety of crossover. But the kind of thing that we can't do that I think would be really fun is some kind of a futuristic cyberpunk kind of thing. I think would be so fun to have a crossover episode in, because there's just so many unique storytelling devices and things that you can use there. Just all of the, instead of neuromancy, you have cybernetics. There's just so many things that would be really fun to explore there.
A cowboy beef up.
I mean, yeah, it's just, it would be so good.
It's just there.
All right, Chase, do you want to read the next question?
Sure, I can do that. So, any chance we can get a rough estimate of how many different types of magic there are? Like a range, maybe? Question mark. This comes from Kaysen.
I mean,
I think that's your answer. No.
Yeah.
At least 3.
At least 3.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come on. At least 4.
At least 4.
No,
Types
at
of
least
magic?
5.
No, I'll say if I may.
Go for it.
You have no idea what I'm about to say. So.
No.
I'll say that answer strongly depends on exactly what you mean by magic, because there are, I will say, different varieties of magic. This is something that you already know, right? You've seen this happen. You've got clerics and spellbinders and wizards. Those are things that are different. So depending on how broad of a category you refer to magic as will determine kind of how many overall types of magic there are. So I'm not going to give you a number, because that number would be very large depending on what you count. You can even kind of think to some degree some of the natural world things are magical from our own perspective, but may not necessarily be considered magical within the world. So do you count that as magic? And if so, that kind of expands the number again.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to give you a specific number, also because I want you to find that out in game. But I'm going to say that note that there are many different kinds of magic, and that will change your perspectives of those things a lot. And some of those different kinds of magic are not. It's not that all magic is works fundamentally the same way. Which again, you've kind of seen this a little bit. So even
in the base classes.
Yeah, even in the base classes, you can kind of see this stuff.
Spellbinder.
I was actually going for cleric there.
Cleric.
Yeah, like a cleric fundamentally doesn't work the same way as a wizard, right? And there's some question about exactly what that is. Some of you may already know kind of what that might be, but that kind of expands out, right? So,
Good answer.
yes.
Good
Chris, you want
question.
to take the next question?
Sure. What GM would win in a free-for-all game of Risk? Not me.
Not me.
I would get bored so much. I've never finished a game of Risk. Good lord.
I've
Not
never
it. I think it's
played.
I'd Chase or
Keller or Chase?
Yeah.
Because you're the game person. You're the tactical person.
Don't you love Risk?
either that or Surprise Keenan out of nowhere.
I was-
Maybe
I think
Keenan.
it's-
Yeah, Keenan or Chase.
It's a
Keenan's
surprise
also-
Keenan or me.
Keenan's also like a chess whiz, so
Right.
Well, I've stalemated Chase a couple times.
Like 3 times exactly.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So
Out of 20 games. No.
no, it's not 3.
Out of 4 games, actually.
Nice. Yeah.
I beat
So-
you that one time.
Did you?
Yeah. Almost
he's in
certainly
denial.
It's
one of those two. Yeah. That would be my best guess. Fun question.
That's thank you for
It's a good
that.
question.
Oh man, that's bringing back memories of a Risk game until like 4 in the morning. Imaginary, remember that?
I miss Risk.
Yeah.
I haven't played forever.
I love Risk.
Go do that on your own.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm not putting myself in like the top 2 slots because I would lose patience and start making way too risky moves.
Yeah,
It's true.
So
Sure.
It's like
I-
it's 1 in the morning. I move all my
Yeah.
troops.
Risk.
Tactician, yeah.
All right.
some people have gone on some dungeons, others on other dungeons. Can players combine their dungeon map fragments together, or does a single character have to personally do every single dungeon? You may recall the nature of the map you've received. So if you want to try to experiment with the combining of those map pieces, you may try, but they have been in a actually looks very aesthetically similar way to your person in the way that the mark you got for being a gate warden was applied to you. It's a very similar looking thing, and so it's on your body physically. So if you can find a way to try to transfer that, you may absolutely pursue that, but otherwise there's not an obvious way to just like, here you go.
I mean,
That
get
makes
a
sense.
9.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, you can find out.
Next event. Good question.
Oh, my favorite terminology. What interaction brought the most unfortunately deep lore discussion? I think that phrase was originally started off with putting one of the prisms on the
Yeah.
head of an arrow and how
Yeah.
That did result in a very long minute conversation.
Yeah, that was a bit of a pressure cooker for us to make sure we understood some interactions specifically and carefully. That was probably the most specific interaction specifically that happened in game because of a player's decision or choice that prompted something. Usually we have the unfortunately deep lore all sussed out before and a bit. So
Yes, usually.
usually.
I don't remember other specifics.
There, what's that?
It's also, I guess, a catalyst for unfortunately deep lore is all of the those of you that just hoard items for years.
yeah.
And they just whip out this item from like a very specific main event
I guess
quest 3 years ago, and they're like, "Can I use this?" It's like, what?
I do remember we had to have a discussion when Lane actually made his most recent sword.
Yes.
That was also
Yes.
a very long, deep lore discussion.
Yes.
That was required.
And ended up having to produce a unique field on his sheet to write something down. So,
Yes.
So
So.
Fantastic.
the juniors
Yep.
had one of those last.
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I was like, the juniors had not like an unfortunate deep lore, but they did a thing with an item, and we were both like, but I think also that's only a junior thing that's been happening so far. So I won't say anything about it, but that was a discussion that had to happen.
Yes. All right, next up we've got another kin for you. This is one of Chase's. You want to announce it, Chase?
Yes. So this kin here, that you'll be seeing here in just a second, is the Jade Imperial. I actually really like this image because there's this concept for Jade Imperials that it's always been a thing, but I've never done it. I don't think I've frankly done a great job of communicating it, and it's something that I think visually was captured very well here, which is a lot of Jade Imperials will wear jade as like sewn in pieces on their clothing. So if you have a jade that is maybe a little bit higher up, they'll actually have jackets or whatnot that have jade beads on them, and that's kind of what you can see on that jacket as there's various different places on it where it's not that they have like a lot of embroidery would be instead like little tiny jade beads that are like sewn onto jackets and that sort of thing. They also have a pretty strong affinity for sailing, which I think is fairly seen but maybe not the most like talked about, and so you can kind of get that like almost militaristic vibe a little bit from that, and this kind of organized and that sort of thing. So this would be an aristocrat here of some variety. So somebody who's probably a Citrite in Jade Society.
And they're not green.
And they're not green. Jade Imperials are not green. Fun fact.
He's a dapper boy.
Yes. Something that is hard to capture in the image. Reese tried very hard to capture this. I just made a thing that's extremely hard to draw, which is that Jades have opalescent skin, which means you can kind of, it's like the feature of, if you're looking at actually a piece of jade, how it almost looks like you can see into it just a little bit. And it's that kind of text, that almost texture looking thing. That is, their skin is like that. So that doesn't show through in really just about, I can't imagine a way to show that very well in a picture. But that is part of them as well. So Reese did an excellent job on this one. So.
Yes.
All right, next question. How do you come up with new abilities for the classes that work so well? Like how you miraculously fixed warriors. Tristan, from Tristan.
Oh.
You're too kind. So much trial and error, honestly.
Yes.
Which often happens because we'll make something and then it'll exist in the game and we get to see it used a whole bunch. We're like, that did or didn't work, or
never picked at all because people realize it's trash before we do.
Yep. But it is wild how much we'll make something and be like, yeah, this is a good fix, and then come back to it a few years later and be like, wow, why did what?
Convert with the numbers.
It's so it's especially because little bits that change a lot of other things, so things will change and you'll back something and be like, oh, now that doesn't make much sense, but
And some
trial and error.
yeah. Something that was mentioned earlier by Chelsea as well is that we just spend a lot of time on mechanics. We actually spend a good chunk of our time on mechanics because it's a very fundamental part of our game, right? And we want to make sure that the actual like feeling of growth that you have as a character, both mechanically and like informationally and roleplay wise, are both really good. And so part of the answer to that question is trial and error. The other part is just a lot of work. And the other part is often, like, occasionally we will get out as we're trying to make a thing and just test it out. So that's actually something that we did with Warriors this particular time was we were like, hey, there's a few of these things. We're not sure how it would feel. Let's whack each other with some swords and see how it feels. And so...
It also helps that all of us have very different ways of going about numbers and thinking about things. So it does make things take a lot longer, but it is a good amount of... kind of self-checking.
Yeah, I feel like I can say it. We spend like 2 whole meetings talking about expose.
Yep.
So that level of like we will sit and work on a problem until it's solved.
Yep.
Until we just go insane.
Yeah, somewhere in the ballpark of 20 man hours went into exposing.
Yeah.
So that's just what it takes sometimes
Yes.
to make something that doesn't break the game horribly anymore.
To make something that we come back to in 3 years.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're gonna be like, oh, maybe that's too strong.
Absolutely.
Next question. Is the Witcher War actually over? What did we miss by our dear Bethany?
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's
so
a good
I'll
question.
say the Witcher War in the recent sense with the Dark Owl, that is over.
That was done.
There's more behind the scenes, which many people can assume because everybody knows there are multiple Witcher sisters, and that was mostly propagated by one of them. So the conflict at large, or maybe there's not a conflict yet, but there are more sources to things like that, but that specific conflict and that war is over. There was a little bit of... I personally really enjoyed how it shook out, but there were some like behind the scenes story things or kind of interactions between the sisters themselves that played parts in how that war ended, which did kind of end in a little bit of a weird feeling ending. But there was also a decent amount of work gone into that story of there are certain times where the end of something shouldn't necessarily feel super like happy and huzzah because it was a hard time. So I honestly, and I'm sure people have very different feelings of either satisfaction or frustration with it, but I personally was a fan of it did kind of feel hollow, and I think that it should have. But yeah, so that conflict as what it was, yes, that is over. The things that caused that,
There's still more story to be told.
Some of you are aware of the sister aforementioned that was kind of behind that one, and some interactions around how the event ended, again aforementioned. So you have a pretty good idea of, yes, that this specific leg of the war is over. I guess we could say that the battle is over.
Yeah. But the war continues. We got the sun back. That's what matters.
There it is. Our next question comes from Julie. How does in-game versus out-of-game time work? We usually hear the rule of thumb of about a month in-game between events. It's a good question. It is, from what I believe, it's 2 months out-of-game. Or sorry, you can say it better than I can.
However much time has transpired out of game has transpired in game. So with the exception of we try to say that there's roughly a month that passes during the course of an event. Some events that's obviously not the case, like with the Brink, where there was a known quantified amount of time that happened during the event. But otherwise, there's assumed you're actually, when you go back to town after a quest, there's a couple days that you're recovering your body from all of the injuries from the previous quest before you go back out. And that's just an unspoken, that's why you recover all of your talents and things when you get back to town, is because you have rested. So we try to say that it's a month of questing and then a month off, a month of questing, then a month off, is the general rule.
Yep. But the actual like date in game versus date out of game follows the same rate.
Yes.
So
Fluctuates a little bit, but if you're looking at like the age of your character, add the amount of actual years since you started playing, and then there's a bit of fluctuation when it comes to like your guys' quest took a few days in order to.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do to keep that. So
Yeah.
hand wave some of that.
Just no more multiple day quests. All right, our next question comes from Kaysen. He asked, "How old are the Grand Dragons?" In parentheses, Dracon. That is a good question.
As you can tell, our lovely Coleman is not here with us.
He's sadly missed.
For the record, for any of you that don't know, Coleman is in fact alive. Yay! But with the combination of he has a tiny little girl that he is taking care of, and also the stunt company that he owns, runs, and works with have been doing super well for themselves. So he has been, I think he said Ronan's been a part of 4 or 5 different movies this year so far.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's been working a lot of commercials and stuff like that too, which is a matter of he'll get a call and leave immediately and be gone for like 3 to 5 days for that. So all good things. We're super stoked for him being able to do what it is. He is a little incognito right now, but we have every once in a while get a text from him. So yeah, for any of you that didn't already know, that's kind of where he's been. As far as Grand Dragons go,
They are.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know.
I-
Where are they on the timeline?
I'm pretty sure very.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Safe
think
to say.
I'll say I think on the scale of around 5,000 years,
Yes.
give or take 1,000. I'll give myself that.
We'll
that
say
area.
we'll say 5 to 4,000 years.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's
they're
at
around
least 3.
At least 3.
3 years old.
At least 3.
At
3
least
years.
But perhaps with
But
more.
yes, they are some of the older things that exist in the world as a whole. Cool, we got another kin.
Cool. This time, it's gonna be whatever. Yeah. Oh, we're ready to go. All right. It's a Feralith, I believe a female Feralith. Who, look how lovely she is. She's so fun. She's having a grand old time. This was so fun to make because I just told Reese like, hey, here is the vibe, happy and positive, and they're gardeners.
It's true.
And Reese was like, what is that? I'm kidding. No, she was great. No, seeing they bring me so much joy, and I hope it brings everyone else joy. And her name is Nancy. So
Important fact.
it's important, guys.
Yes.
But no, I mean, we've all said it. Seeing the kin, like seeing what we've described for years and being on paper, it's just there is a euphoria to that of like, oh my goodness.
So much joy.
Yes, Reese, you're going to be
amazing.
thinking at least 6 more times, so you better get used to it. It's true. It's
Yes,
true.
seriously.
It's true.
I was on vacation with my family, and I was just sitting on the beach when I got the notification. I was like, Mom! Like, I could not stop gushing and showing my mom. Does she know what I'm talking about? No. Am I still gushing about it? Yes.
Mom is a dark elf.
Mom, it's cool.
Good job, sweetie.
Good job.
Are we
All right.
winning, son? All right.
Are we winning? No.
What? All right.
okay,
Keenan,
yeah.
you should say this,
This
one.
comes from Rhiannon. What is your favorite Rafu memory? For those who don't know, Rafu was a character that I played when I was just a wee lad. I was about 12 when I played him, up until I think I was about 18. So I was a
Yeah.
legal adult when I finished playing him.
Oh.
But he was this old, borderline senile, old dwarf who unfortunately found a ridiculously powerful item, and that just was the crux of his character. Sorry, Kelly.
I'm not bitter. That's fine.
Are you? So my favorite memory, you all may have a different one, but for me it was the probably one of the last times the last time I played Rafu after he died. He was saving his son from enslavement, and he had to kill him in a Colosseum fight to get. No, sorry, he had to fight his son to free him from being a slave, which resulted in me dying, thus ensuring he was free. That was sad. That was really impactful. But after that, the after effects of that and role playing that with Coleman was probably some of the most immersive, deep RP I've ever experienced. And I don't feel comfortable saying it because it's something that some of you may experience whenever your character dies, and I want that to be like a first time experiencing thing. But having that whole interaction was super sweet. Though you may have different opinions.
Oh, I've got some answers.
Yes.
Okay, I got.
We all have our opinions.
Well, so yeah, we also.
For context, they were playing together as players.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the time,
Same here.
this
I was
fun.
the
Yes.
cleric healing up after him.
Because basically all of us except for Keller were all in Chase's house. So this was at the time that my character Gabriel was also playing, and both of us were massive hammer wielding berserkers. So there were some very fun bro moments of like just time to go. I'll give two. One of which was kind of an aftermath in the more serious route of after all of that happened. My character went to the same place and just got to basically raise a city, which was some fun catharsis, and ended up being where the Painted Lady is now.
Yep.
We kind of leveled that for some city to be built, which was cathartic and fun, albeit sad. I also realized how tight my armor was during that fight. I didn't breathe very well. But a funny one that is just such a specific memory for me. We were all on a quest. We were it was an underwater quest, I think. We were trying to find something, and so we split off. And some of us found it. I think it was 1, 2, 3 of us that were together. Yeah. And so we found the thing, and we're like, great, let's go back. But we're like, oh, we gotta let our other pals know that we did. So we're like, oh, we can just we were in a pretty flat, sandy, underwater a section of the oceans. We're like, okay, we can just kind of mark in the sand, that kind of thing, because we're all going around the same area. And so Chelsea was just like, oh, that's a great idea. And this was at the time that Rafu was quite old, and so he actually had a cane, and he would use the cane unless he was in a berserk. He would use the cane. And so Chelsea with that thing, he was like, oh yeah, we could do that. And she kind of grabs his cane to start marching, and I just hear this as he just falls over on his back. Which Chelsea did not realize until she finished drawing. She's like, I got to help him up. It was beautiful. It was a good time.
There were some good memories. I just remember, because this was so random for me, because me and Keenan, because of course Chase had Gim disease, and then Archangel also got Gim disease, so then it was just me and Keenan in the house for a while. And there was this one quest at one point, he just came up to me and asked me permission to start killing them, and I'm like, why are you asking me this? What?
All of my friends are left.
Yeah.
Oh, my friends.
I don't have free will. Come on, give me to me.
I'm like, why are you asking me? But
can I tell the exam story?
Sure, you can do that.
Okay,
Yes.
this will be quick.
Last one.
Last
Yeah,
one.
we'll finish up.
We could go
So,
on.
all right, we can. So a few years ago, we did when the Gearn first came. That was one of the big storyline plot points. And me, Chris, I believe you were on there, and I believe Julie, and we were all going to.
Gearn were parasitic crustaceans.
They're cool.
So that led us to go underwater, and we first encountered naiads, and it was a super cool quest. And Chase was storytelling the quest, and at the end we were at this super beautiful stone structure that Chase was describing, and I had a kin attribute called Examine, which for years never worked, and I would use it in the weirdest situations. Like I would be talking to you like, Examine, it's not real. Now, dang it.
In ways you're not supposed to.
In ways I'm not supposed to, and it was kind of frustrating for the GMs because they were trying to do a quest, and I would be a meme. And so Chase was in the middle of describing this beautiful structure that obviously he put time into making, and it was very awesome. And in the middle of it, I interrupted. I was like, Examine, and Chase I can tell his brain was like, well, it's real. Anyways, I felt so stupid, but yes.
What a time. All right, let's go on to the next one. For each GM, if you were to add a new thing to Claritas without any oversight by any other GM, what would you add? From Brady. That's a fun one.
That's hard.
Well, I guess to answer in a way that's I probably wouldn't do this because we have very set things, but without some of those set things, I've always thought that just plain light magic and dark magic are pretty cool stereotypes in a lot of games, and we have some similar-ish things, but not exactly that. So I think that would be a fun one to throw in.
truthfully and honestly, I'll give one example to this, but there's a handful of things that I would want to woefully overcomplicate the necessity of interactive pieces of a particular like playstyle. For example, I had a delightful idea about hydromancy that I think is really cool, but would make anybody who's playing a hydromancer have to like have everything pre-planned out to do, which I think is awesome. But basically making it so that because there's three different phases of hydromancy, 3 different stances, that each hydromancy spell would represent the changing of one stance to another stance. And the only way you could cast that spell was if you were in the starting one, and when you finished casting that spell, you would be in the ending one. So if you wanted to get to a particular spell, you had to find a route of spell casts to be able to get to that spell. I think that would be phenomenally cool, but I don't think most people would want to play that particular variety of Magic. But you'd have a lot of you would constantly be changing stances, but you'd have to be thinking about how and where you could use different talents or different spells in different ways to be able to get to the actual effect that you wanted to. Because your only way to change stances is to use a spell that changes the stance to something else, which would force you to diversify. I think it'd be really cool. I also realize it probably wouldn't be nearly as fun as I am imagining it would be, but I think it's cool. So that would be, yeah.
Cutscenes, movie scenes. I'm a film boy, bro. But no.
More voice acting.
More voice acting. But no, I think our game is awesome.
Yeah.
And
Look at any of Keenan's quests.
Hey, you've done cutscenes.
Cinema.
I sure have.
Yeah.
The Exorcism.
You guys seen a movie before?
No.
Chelsea, do you have an answer for this?
No. Because I'm still like, wait, maybe I
Do you have any questions?
keep it in the backlog in case I can
Sure.
potentially use it.
Nice.
No one must know.
I'm not gonna tell them.
Yeah. I've
Maybe
worked
forgot.
too long and hard on this rule set to want to ruin it with one thing that breaks it all. So I'm good.
What do you
Yes, our next one is what's the timeline of Claritas? What major events have our adventurers gone through? I'd like to hear more of what's happened before many of us joined.
Ooh, that's
Good,
a
okay.
great question.
I guess I'll start by kind of expanding on what they talked about. The whole conflict with the Gyurn
Yes.
was something that started a lot. So where the Fairy Nation used to be, it was the Fairy Nation. It had there are a couple of unfortunate circumstances that happened in that poor city, but I think the starting one of which was that. So it was a thing where there's these things called Gyurn. They're like horseshoe crabs, but very long, and they can attach onto the back of a dead thing and like take over its spine and zombify it without being a zombie. Which were, for whatever reason, just like swarming out of the ocean, and it just kind of wrecked like half of that entire country. It was a really cool 2-part quest that was probably like my favorite and the most impactful quest because my first character was a fairy, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. It was also when I dragged my sister to come LARP with us during the second part of that quest, so a lot of fun things there, and it kind of ended with the Fairy Nation being a little bit in shambles, and that's also the first, so that's when we met Naiads, because we had to go underwater, and that's also the first that we saw of Jade Imperials, because they had made landfall during this, because of these Gyurn were very good at picking up individuals, and fairies did not have a great military, but had some very strong individuals. It was really good against the fairies, but the Jade Imperials were not great as individuals and super good as a unit, so they had a much easier time handling it. So they just kind of made a city in a few days, because they can do that right in the middle of what was fairy kingdom land, but that whole thing. And so that became a conflict, and there was a huge dispute between them, and it was just that kind of turned into a lot of things, how the Jades spread through there. Eventually the disappearing of the fairy kingdom, which is now just recently kind of reappeared. So that was a pretty big change the geography type, a couple of things that happened.
Yeah.
I think I'll piggyback off of that with what happened to them next, and then if you want to talk about shards.
Sure, yeah, I can do that.
So the fairies who were just down for the count, these poor guys who had just like had been attacked by these crazy creatures and weren't able to handle them well, and had their land encroached on, and their king was doing their best, and just it wasn't enough. Were on the back foot. All of a sudden, just get completely overrun by some vampires. So the one day they're just trying to recover. The next day, everything is just covered over by goblin vampires, and they're having a real bad time. So that's when they decided to escape out. I don't know how much you wanted to talk about their leaving.
Sure, yeah, I can talk about
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning. Now, so the thing that Keller had mentioned briefly was the shards piece of that, which is there was a thing that had occurred, and notably, all the stuff that we're discussing is stuff that has happened while players have been playing the game.
Yes.
So this isn't like prehistory or anything like this. This is stuff that players have interacted with. So these things called shards were things that did exist long before, and were kind of put in a way to be somewhat secure. And the method for securing them started failing, which caused a lot of problems about. So there's a lot of things like ethereals used to be floating in a city in the sky, and that fell from the sky, and that was related to that. The Gyrn coming up out of the water was related to that. And there was just a bunch of other things. Steve, if you've ever heard about Steve, was related to that. So there's just a whole bunch of other little things that were kind of tied to that kind of strung along a whole bunch of kind of linear things in a row that started some problems and continued some problems. And then shortly after the vampire attack on the fairies, they were in a position where they were still kind of in conflict with the Jade Imperials in the area. And so, at the moment, because they got absolutely destroyed, they were finding out that there was some way that they could kind of escape Claritas for some time to try to rebuild. And so they went through that process, sought it out, and eventually disappeared for some unknown time. And they have only just recently reappeared and are different than they used to be. And so kind of in that note of timeline stuff, it's kind of cool that some of those things have been going for probably close to like 9-8 years, something like that. Yeah.
That was also one of the main introductions of what people have been referring to and you've heard referred to as the heroes. So that is where a lot of them started getting seen for some of their first appearances, was during that arc.
Yes.
Chelsea, do you have something?
The shard arc.
I was just gonna say, I just realized that the fairies disappeared 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Jeez, it's been a bit.
Yep.
All right, next up we have another kin. Would you like to introduce it?
Yes.
Bum-bum-bum.
On your screen right now is the female dark elf. Let's go. Literally, I took the description from Kenny, and dark elves are usually like people that look like they're suffering from hypothermia. But I was like watching Pirates of the Caribbean for the first time this past year, and I saw Elizabeth Swann's like pirate king coat, and I was like, Reese, something like this, please. And she's like, perfect, let's go. And so that's what inspired this outfit for her, because they are very seafaring kind of people, and that's kind of where I got my idea. Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Enjoy.
Yes, the Reese are so
One
good.
art.
All right, next one. The church at Rexportum is the dominant religion in Claritas, but any large religion is bound to befall doctrinal disputes. How are these disputes handled by the church, and has it led to any schisms? So, that is a good question. For sure, they're one of the older civilizations, so they are, especially religion-wise, would be more widespread. I think a good way to answer that is they also have quite a few militaristic tendencies. So there certainly have been schisms, and the victors are the ones that write the history. So they have been quelled. That is some early history type stuff, and there have been some even recently of splitting off or whatnot. But it tends to get blown out of proportion story-wise, and then put down pretty hard. Is the normal.
Yeah, the dominant religion in Claritas is the Church of the Sculptor for a reason.
Yeah, I was like, I can add an extra little piece in there. There are some places as well where the Church of the Sculptor is like officially a religion, but there are some differing beliefs. But it's far enough away from the core of Kinsman power or Rexportum power that it's not something that's like trying to be quelled, and also it's to some degree like an official religion versus non-official religion type thing. So there are a couple places where you'd have like a good example of this is like the Dwarven Kingdom at large. Officially, like if you're talking about an official religion, it would be the Church of the Sculptor, but they have their own sets of beliefs which are they probably wouldn't call a religion, but other people from the outside might call a religion. that have some conflict with that, but it's not something that it's far enough removed from Rex Portum and difficult enough to affect that it's kind of just as is currently.
Next up, we have another kin for you. We're going to be doing these a little bit more often. It's the Draconin. So take a look at that fantastic art.
Such a fierce look.
I know.
Such a fierce look.
Don't mess with
I
them.
wouldn't want to mess
It's
with
true.
her.
It's true.
Yes, obviously the person who is in charge of this kin is Coleman, so he can't officially introduce her or tell any of the specific inspirations for it visually. But I think this one speaks pretty well for itself.
Yeah.
It's very distinct and very strong presence. So
That-
more excellent art by Reese.
Yes.
Yeah, that specific look on her face is what I imagine the associated look of piercing gaze is supposed to look like.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
like
That's why you're like, ugh.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So
For sure.
So good job, Reese.
yeah.
Cool.
For our next question, we have who's the oldest NPC that the players have interacted with?
That's okay.
Probably Bane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
See, I know the answer.
Oh,
When you
this
say-
is like that question of like, what's the first Pokemon?
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Bane was the first NPC.
Yes. Yeah. Bane was the first NPC created for Claritas, so that's the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's true. Yeah.
That's
he was-
the-
Wait, is that
Coleman.
actually
Yep.
He was,
legit?
Bane was Coleman's beta character.
It was mine.
Or no, that's right. It's your beta
Yeah.
character.
So that's so Bane. If for those who've interacted
That's
with him,
funny. As far as in-game oldest, good question.
Good question.
Yeah, fantastic. You've
Right on.
interacted with some people.
And
that
also,
are
that's
pretty
kind of a
old.
hard thing to answer. Like the ancient giant dryads.
Yeah.
Do you count that as old? Because he's like 2 years old, or
Yeah.
it's kind of a gray.
You
How
mean
long is that?
in-game or out-of-game age?
Yeah.
it's true.
Yes. So we will leave it at that. The oldest out of game is Bane. The oldest in game, there's lots of people, and most of them would be spoilers.
Yeah.
So
hey.
great question.
Go find those
Great question.
people.
We like it. All right, we have yet another kin for you. So get excited. It's
The
fairies.
fairy. Specifically, this is a nature fairy.
Hey.
I actually think this is really great. So the first version of this image that Reese had done was with kind of orange leaves. And this was really hilarious because I had not thought about, like the yearly, I guess, what do you call that cycle? I don't know. Is that just like a leaf cycle? Like, what do you, the like
Seasons.
seasonal?
Yeah.
Yeah, the seasonal falling of leaves as like part of it. And I was like, oh, actually that makes complete sense for fairies that are nature fairies that have, it makes sense for some of them to have like seasonal effects where they would actually lose their wings temporarily. However, I had her change it to green because the green is kind of the more like stereotype one. But I think it's kind of interesting. So something to note, it kind of like gets that like move with the seasons things. And he also has a particularly inquisitive look on his face as he is pondering nature and the secrets of the world.
Which you do often.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Excellently done.
Yes. Very good.
All right. I think we can get this one pretty quick.
Yeah.
There's going to be more info on Kin and Claritas history in the updated website. The quick answer is yes. Obviously, there's orders to things, but all of us have been working on putting our information, like kind of general information for our kin, on a similar, because all of us had very different ways of writing things down. So we've coalesced and made it all look the same and kind of put the same headings on all of our things. So we're trying to make all of that information look the same and be nice and pretty with a bow on it. And then kin information is going to be on the website, and then eventually we will have history on there as well. Kin stuff is going to come first because we want more people to be able to know about the kin they're playing if they're starting. But eventually the goal is to have kind of a wiki-esque timeline / major events, stuff like that. So anything your character could just go ask a commoner about, you could probably find here.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a lot of writing and some time to go through that, but yeah, that is certainly the plan.
Good question.
Right.
And we find
We got Yona, another kin. Surprise. That's right, we got more kin. This is the Modka Yona, which is their spirit bearers and their nobles, their leaders. You can see here some child was probably being picked on in school, and so the dispute was taken to the elder, and you can see the look on that face. You don't do that.
it's
You are in trouble. So that is, I can't describe how much I love that picture. It encapsulates so much of what is so stereotypically mama bear about those kin.
Yeah.
In one image that is I don't think people necessarily get most of the time because they think about their very docile nature, which is true and good. But seeing the fierceness come out when you pick with one of their own is fantastic, as well as just seeing some of the details on like the eyes, different color. What's that called? Heterochromia. Yes. Yeah. And just it's just such a good scene because I think a lot of them, like the personalities of the kin come out really well, but just like having to be that little scene there that encapsulates it very well is delightful.
Yeah, there's a scolding. There's a certain talking to.
There is.
All right, next question. Some of us saw Naiad shotguns. If a player were wanting to investigate these, how to acquire or make them, how would a player go about that, perhaps a generalist. So the quick answer to this is magical crafting. If you notice, any of those shotguns that they were doing had shells, which were just gems.
Yep.
So all of that can be, I thought that was a cool effect. It's magical crafting to make something about it. The delivery method being shotgun was mostly for vibes, but again, it's all about the specificity. If you want to make it hand cast, great. If you wanted to make something where you had some noble friend that invented a tube to, it's sure. All of that is just kind of the main effect from that would come from magical crafting. If you thought it was cool, do it. If you were like a specific thing, then yes, character in game could maybe go to where that was, and that might help zero down, make talk to the person that made that, something like that. Sure, but most of that is crafting and up to you to be creative.
Introduce your next kin.
Ooh,
Yeah.
This is the last picture we have for you guys today. This is the goblin.
Ooh.
This was just entertaining because I don't think say to make him this chaotic, but it just fits so well. Fits the trial by goblin vibe extremely well. We have two of each kin. So the other goblin is the cutest thing in the world. So there are many more of these. These are just some of the ones that we picked for today that were ready and that we wanted to show off. But there are at least two for every. Yep. There are two for every kin. Yep. Some kin have big enough separations that there are a few other ones, but
Yes.
So very fun.
Excellent job.
Yes.
These are absolutely delightful and wonderful.
Yeah.
Huge fans.
We can't
And I'm
stop
sure-
praising you.
Yes.
You're so
Everybody in
good.
the chat is also
They're probably
singing the praises of this delightful art as well.
the
Better.
most popular player right now.
Yeah.
All right, and probably one final question. What has been your favorite roleplay moment from a player recently, and what has been your favorite player and NPC interaction recently or ever?
Oh man.
Well, that's a tough one.
I'll give
a tough one.
I'll give a player interaction here, player and NPC interaction. I really liked the little nerd meeting that we had. It was just delightful. I enjoyed everyone being in a room and talking about theories about things and having our little snack time and a little tea time, and it was just a good time. I liked our little nerd interaction. So
Yeah. There was this time recently at the.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
You guys get pretty colors.
Hi.
It's okay, you can still hear us.
Pretty colors.
Keep talking.
Keenan didn't charge his batteries.
No, I did. It just takes up a lot of space.
Oh no.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Oh.
O'Reilly.
Auto
That
parts.
timing.
Yeah, we good?
Enter. You gotta hit enter.
maybe.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Stand by.
Way to break immersion so you can.
Thank you for dealing with our technical difficulties. No.
You guys can keep talking.
So anyways, hi. At my most recent main event, there was we were like finishing things up and whatnot, and I had this player at the junior event come up to me, and
You good to go?
yay, Mazel tov. I had a player come up to me at one point, and she's like, "Why don't you wear more jewelry?" And I'm like, "It's just something our mom never gave us." And so she just like pulls out this little hair wrap thing. He's like, "Now you get to wear one yourself." And it's like, "Oh, okay, now I get to keep an actual fizz wrap now for this NPC." Okay, so it was very sweet.
It was very delightful.
Yeah.
At the last senior event, we all had game off and everyone went home, but it was like me and 3 other players who were still talking around a fire. And for like 2 hours, they were just like talking, and I would occasionally throw in like a vibe setter, and then Like I heard like 2 of them crying, and I was like, oh, whoops. But like for those 2, I didn't say much. For those 2 hours, they were entirely like in their character. Everything they were saying was based off of things that their character would know and how they were responding. It was not them as a person; it was them as their character. And I was enthralled with it that I forgot what time it was, and was like, guys, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Leave. But those type of moments are my bread and butter. The campfire moments where you're just talking as a character in Claritas. Ooh, baby. Ooh.
I think we had some really fun ones with. We went on a little Drakid quest where we went into the dark forest and found some little animals. This was going at the same time as everybody was crying about Angeluccio. It was a hilarious juxtaposition. But the whole group we had had some really, really fun interactions because we had Niels as our noble that is super posh and didn't like getting mud on anything, and then we had a nature fairy which was perfect for the woods, and like it was a fun combination of a lot of little bits, memes, jokes, and also interactions that felt supernatural but were also very character related, and it was super entertaining. That was a good one.
Perfect.
Well, thank you all for joining us for our 3rd annual Claritas Ask Me Anything. It has been a delight to have you. I hope you have all enjoyed it and had many good answers to your questions. We will, of course, be having this again next year, so if you have any questions that were left unanswered that you still need answered, you could probably ask us outside of this, but it would be fun if you kept it till an entire year later.
True.
Another thing that we've got for you, we have a promo code for our merch. So this is our biggest discount yet that we have done. It is 20% off anything in the store, and for that reason, the code is anything24. Anything24. So use that code in the merch site and get 20% off anything and everything. That code will be live for 48 or 72 hours. So get those orders in quickly, and we look forward to seeing you all at this upcoming event. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good night. Good night.
Goodbye.
We need to all be in a pose now.
Did we stop?